We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections.
If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious.
Violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings. They are coming after me because I am fighting for you. That's what's happening.
Greetings, fellow thought criminals, and thank you for joining the insurrection. I'm Michael Lauber, and today I'm joined by the editor-in-chief at the Post-Millennial, Libby Emmons. How are you doing this morning, Libby?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
Oh, living the dream as always, watching the world improve in some ways and burn in others. But we're going to get into that. But before we get started, I do want to thank you for joining. You guys do great work over there at the Post-Millennial. There's probably barely a day that goes by that we don't cover at least one story over there. And as we'll see in a minute, you guys are really dominating the new media as the drive-by media, the dinosaur media, the traditional media, whatever you want to call them, fades out. We've talked on here numerous times about how much of viewership they've lost just in the last 12 months, where CNN is down over 40% in numbers. MSNBC took a drop close to 60%. The Washington Post, between online clicks and distribution, they're down almost 90% just since the election. I mean, it's incredible, but this is creating new opportunities. So I guess if you could kind of introduce yourself to our audience, not that they don't already know who you are, and kind of give us a little bit of your background, and then let's dive into this.
Sure. My name's Libby Emmons. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Post-Millennial. I've been with the Post-Millennial since 2019. I actually started as a freelancer and worked my way up, and here I am. We have a great staff. We have a terrific group of reporters at the Post-Millennial. Also, Human Events is part of our media group. You may know Jack Posobiec, who's a senior editor there, who works on Human Events every day. And it's really an honor and a privilege to work with these guys all the time.
Oh, yeah, you've got a great team there, great people. Jack's another great one. I was over in Romania with him and over in, I think he was also in Brussels, and we were there covering the Making Europe Great Again events, both the first and second one.
Those were wild.
Oh, yeah. But a lot of great connections there, a lot of great people. I'm sure he had the same experience. And, I got to meet a lot of foreign journalists. We now continue to work with Scarlett Karoleva and, what's her name? Candela Sol out of Argentina. They're both regulars on here. And it's good to help get the insight from people on the ground overseas, especially as these countries are kind of struggling for freedom, something closer to we have here, this opportunity, because we really are seeing a worldwide freedom movement right now, but we're also seeing these globalists recoil every time we begin to advance. But I do want to go ahead and jump into, we got to start off with some good news for a change. Breaking, President Trump says Hamas and Israel have signed off on phase 1 of the peace plan. Gaza ceasefire and hostage release is expected within days as both sides celebrate. And, I do want to kind of temper expectations here. I think this is a great stride forward. Part of the plan, I think, was to get the ball rolling. They still have a number of issues that they have not agreed on just to discuss, like disarmament of Hamas. I think that's going to be a very difficult item to get agreement on. But this is a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a big step in the right direction, and it's one that's been a long time coming. Trump has promised to work on this deal since even before he came into office. It was one of the things he talked about on the campaign trail. And it has been a really fraught issue, especially here in the United States, where you have leftists who are basically advocating for Hamas. And
Yeah.
you have, a bunch of normal people saying, hey, you know what would be better would be some peace. So I really do hope that this all turns out right, that Hamas goes ahead and releases the hostages. A big reason why they would not want to release them is because they're using them as human shields. They're using the dead bodies of their victims as human shields. They're using the Palestinian people for that as well. So I do hope that this all comes off. Hamas is notorious for their delay tactics, And one thing that I'm sure you've noticed as well that's absolutely mind boggling is how you have these people out in the streets in America and in the West. You had people out in Boston last night. I think 13 people were arrested. They want to flood the streets for Palestine. Of course, this use of the term flood is just like what Hamas said. The Al Aqsa flood is what they called their massacre. And you have these
Yeah.
American leftists out here calling for a flood in American streets. They were doing it in Boston, they were doing it Chicago, New York, LA, Seattle. I mean, take your pick of places, our prominent cities. This is where they've been doing this. They come out, they advocate for Hamas, they sort of claim they want peace, but none of them has come out in support of this peace deal. Where are the leftists in support of peace in Israel and the Palestinian Gaza region?
Yeah, it's a good question because again, well, I mean that's part of the problem though is a lot of this. I've been calling them the Hamas wing of the Democrat Party. I don't think they really understand the situation on the ground. They just believe this myth that somehow Israel is conquering, stealing foreign land, stealing their territory. They just don't live in reality. But they also are kind of prone. They're the typical low information voter, as Rush Limbaugh used to call them. They don't really understand the issue on the ground. They don't understand the reality of who Hamas is, what they represent. And when I see these groups like Queers for Palestine out there marching in the street, they don't understand. They'd be learning to fly off rooftops if they were living over there right now, or in Iran, or in a lot of these other countries they purport to support. But they don't understand what Islam is in the Islamic world. They either the call for intersectionality is so great, they think that by linking arms with these literal terrorists right now, somehow it'll propel them to victories in elections here. But I do think most Americans now are waking up to the reality of what Hamas and the rest of these Islamic terrorist organizations really represent. They don't want peace. They want the destruction of Israel. They want them, from the river to the sea. They want them pushed out, destroyed, never to return.
Yeah, for sure. That's what they're looking for. And yesterday, was it yesterday on Tuesday in New York City, we saw Mahmoud Khalil, who the Trump administration has attempted to deport for inciting violence on college campuses. And there was a Harvard grad out there, and both of them were calling to be stronger than Hamas was on October 7th. They're calling for more of the same, more violence, more mayhem, more massacres. And I think that a lot of these leftists, when they're out there marching around, if you ask them what river and what sea, they will not be able to name the Mediterranean. They will not be able to name the River Jordan. They have no idea that what they're calling for is genocide. But I think there's another point to this as well, which is that these leftists hate America. They hate Christianity. They hate the culture that our forefathers have built. They hate the founding of our nation. And so they look and they say, oh, does Hamas want the end of the United States? Yes. Do I want the end of the United States? Sure. And they don't realize that destruction means the destruction of themselves as well. There's no free speech in an Islamic dictatorship. That doesn't exist. They should look to Iran. They should look at everything that happened in the Middle East after the Iranian Revolution to see exactly what's in store for them and their blue hair, their tattoos, and their free love as soon as an Islamic dictatorship takes over.
Yeah, exactly. And there have been some out there that have left this Islamic movement and have out there been trying to warn the left of what they're in for once they gain in numbers here. But they're not listening, and unfortunately they won't listen. I don't know if this really is just like a mental illness, just total delusion, or just absolute hatred for America that fuels a lot of these people that, they'll side with any of our enemies at any cost, even when the reality of the situation is these same enemies would destroy them given the chance, given the opportunity here. I'm actually really happy we didn't see worse things happen when they had their little October 7th anniversary parties. They were threatening to shut down Chicago. One of our podcasters, one of our journalists up there, Terry Newsom, he actually got maced by them up there in front of the Israeli embassy on Tuesday. But of course, the media reports it as, oh, they don't know who did it or what happened or what the situation was, and just try to sweep it under the rug. But there has been a good outpouring of support here for this from a lot of these Jewish families here and in Israel. Families of Jewish hostages in Gaza thank President Trump for his work in bringing their loved ones home after 2 years in Hamas captivity. And again, like a lot of these people, as you said, they've been used to shoot human shields. It's suspected that some of them may have actually died in that process throughout the last 2 years. But the fact of the matter is they've been starved, they've been tortured, and worse in some cases. And, I don't know, do we know how many of these remaining hostages are still alive? Because I've heard different numbers there, but I know part of this deal that President Trump just cut was to have their remains brought home for the ones who are no longer with us.
Yeah, I heard, I think about 20 people are still alive. Hamas kidnapped 250 people, including some very small children who they murdered, and the mother of those children. Yeah, so they're holding 20 people still hostage, and it's absolutely crazy that the people out protesting in America's streets don't seem to care about that. Khalil, when he was talking in New York and Columbia just the other day, was talking about how Israel is the one that has hostages because they have locked up terrorists and murderers in their prisons. And he said, the Israeli justice system is terrible. And so all of these people should be released. Yet he's not even speaking out in favor of this peace deal, which will see the release of hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli prisons. And they're still calling for more violence, more destruction against Israel.
I kind of feel like Israel's government can't be that lopsided, considering they've let this little autistic doom goblin released her twice now, Greta Thunberg, after she's tried to bring these flotillas over there. And let's remember that this last batch, too, they tried to create a fake Israeli attack, set a fire on their own deck, pretended it was an Israeli drone till that fell apart. And then it was a bomb. And I don't remember what their story shifted to afterwards. But I mean, this is the second time they've had to scoop her up and release her for leading these flotillas into Gaza. I don't know what that has to do with the environment. I still haven't figured out how Islamic terrorism and the environment are linked, but I guess we don't really need a solid foundation for that either.
Right. I think that's like what James Lindsay says. What does he say? The issue is never the issue. The issue is always revolution. And I think that is definitely Greta Thunberg's whole thing. She's poorly educated. She's poorly informed. And, she was also complaining about conditions in the Israeli detainment center where she was. It's like, okay, girl, just go home, get your GED, make something of your life.
Yeah, anything productive. Yeah, the first time they picked her up, they were going to have her watch videos of the October 7th attack, and she refused to, said it would be a war crime, that it would be torture if she had to watch the video. So she doesn't even want the information of what really happened to see the other side of the story. And I always wonder, like, do these people really believe the things that they're saying, or are they saying it because they know that's what will get them promoted on social media, get them more clout in these leftist circles, or again, is it all an act, or do they really understand? I don't know. I come down
thinking for themselves. I mean, I think that in a lot of ways, they say what they are told to say. A story that went very under the radar this week was Kamala Harris was out in Los Angeles, and she was speaking at the Getty Center as part of what's called a Day of Unreasonable Conversation or something like that. This is something Jill Biden spoke at it last year, blah, 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 all these people. But what's really amazing about this day is this is This is organized by a marketing company that filters it through a fiscal sponsor. So the whole thing is not for profit, tax deductible, taxpayer funded. And the purpose of this day of unreasonable conversation, it's invite only, and it's for Hollywood writers and directors. It's for people who write magazine articles and podcasters. It's so that they can get their messaging from the top and deliver it. And Kamala Harris said, take everything that you're learning here, basically. I wrote it up for the Post Millennial. You can go find it. I don't have the quote at my fingertips. But she said, take everything you're learning here, all this messaging, and infuse it into your scripts, infuse it into your characters. So when we turn on our Netflix or, CBS or whatever streaming service you have, what we are getting is delivered, packaged, gift wrapped messaging from
Yeah.
the top of the Democrats and the leftists. And they are delivering this to us into our living rooms to sit there and watch like it's just basic, interesting entertainment. And it's not. It's massaged messaging. And so when you have the leftists out there and they're screaming, from the river to the sea, let's go murder everybody, what they're really doing is repeating the talking points that they have been given, that have been disseminated, that have trickled down from Kamala Harris and all of the rest of them through Hollywood and into our living rooms. And so if people can't think for themselves, then they're really in trouble and they're just going to repeat this nonsense.
Bingo. Well said. Yeah, they've got to control the narrative somehow. I think that's part of the why we're seeing so many of them like fly off the handle right now, as we're going to get into later, where they're just straight up making things up now, fabricating enemies. Is they've lost a lot of their ability to message. If they can't push their propaganda out through the news, through the traditional media, and through social media, then they infect every program on Netflix and other streaming services and across the media with their message. Everything is always told from a leftist perspective. And that's something we've said on here a number of times, that we'll have really won once we start getting media that caters to conservatives, or even just to the middle of the country, where it's from our worldview. Whereas right now, this propaganda arm is still the strongest tool they have, I think, besides the Soros money and money laundered through USAID to propagate those messages. But I do think the battle is shifting. I want to skip over to our next kind of serious stories here, because you guys really dominated this meeting with President Trump yesterday with a number of your journalists that were there. But Katie Davenport tells President Trump Portland residents are begging for federal intervention from Antifa violence. And this is something we've seen there for a while. There was a video that went viral a while back we covered with black woman that was out there yelling at these protesters in front of ICE because they're keeping her up all night. She can't sleep. She can't go to work. And I imagine a lot of the residents, especially close to that facility in those apartments, are just furious with them, and furious with the Portland police that refuse to intervene and do anything about it.
Yeah, that's right. And Katie knows best. She's been out there working on this since June. She's been documenting Antifa violence and exactly what's been going on in this Portland neighborhood where the ICE facility is located. And there have been plenty of residents who are really fed up with the noise night after night and the violence and all of that stuff just outside their apartment windows. They have to sleep, they have to get to work, they have to get their kids off to school, and they're being prevented from, just living their lives in a normal way because of this ridiculous violence. And the woman that you talked about, the black woman who was out there telling Antifa to cool it, they threatened her. She took them to court, and a judge said that she doesn't have the right to a decent night's sleep because Antifa has the right to protest out front in the street. So that's something that Katie I know that she was very honored to speak to the president about that. And yeah, as you said, we totally dominated the White House roundtable on Antifa yesterday. Katie Davenport was there with all of the work that she's been doing over the past several months and years. Jack Posobiec was there. He's been covering this stuff for years. He wrote a book on it. So did Andy No, who was also there, also working on this for years. And we had more journalists in the room than any other outlet. So that was pretty amazing to watch. I was so proud of them and all the work that they've done.
Well, congratulations. I mean, I really do think your organization there deserves the honor with all the hard work you guys do reporting and all the on-the-ground coverage that Katie and other members of your organization do. That, again, you're bringing the world the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear, and I really think that says something. But yeah, this was another great moment over there. TPUSA Frontlines Savannah Hernandez reveals why Antifa feels emboldened to attack conservative journalists. And again, this is a narrative, a story that we've all covered for years now. That it is a combination of factors. They pretend that the right is an existential threat to their existence, and in a certain way, they're sort of right. I mean, their ideas are becoming less and less popular as more and more normies in the middle are exposed to what they're really doing. That it isn't about being nice to illegal alien families or anything else. That we are in a battle for the future of America right now, and the left is in this delusional idea that somehow they need to continue to defend these things, that we are the enemy, that our views don't matter, our views are hateful, and that it's okay to punch Nazis. They've been calling us fascist Nazis for years now. This is embedded. We've asked them politely to stop, especially after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, but that's just not getting through to them. And they really do, as we saw with what happened to Katie, what's happened to Nick Sorter, what's happened to other journalists. They're attacked by these violent Antifa mob. And if the local police will refuse to enforce any kind of charges or any kind of justice, and they tried to charge Nick Sorter with disorderly conduct. Now, luckily, that was dropped because even there, I guess that was a line too far to charge him for trying to defend himself. But we've also seen this with a lot of less prominent people where it's not getting as much attention, that they are completely willing to attack us. And we know that a lot of these law enforcement entities are essentially compromised, that the Chicago PD was told to stand down after getting ambushed by 10 vehicles and a woman with a gun the other day. Even the dispatcher couldn't believe that that she was having to tell the police officers to not respond. But this lunacy is getting to the point where it's dangerous. They're putting people's lives at risk. And I hate to say it, but I'm not going to be the least bit surprised when something else happens and we do have a journalist or another conservative activist killed by these people in the next few weeks.
Yeah, this was absolutely an amazing moment. I'm glad you pulled it up. Savannah Hernandez, who I might mention, used to work for the Post Millennial before she moved on to Turning Point and is still a friend of the outlet. But yeah, Trump was saying, the president was saying, what we don't understand is why they do this. And Savannah Hernandez pointed out, just as you said, that a lot of this is rhetoric and insults from media that they just throw out there, right? I mean, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, all the rest of these guys come out there and they just they call conservatives Hitler, Van Jones. They say that we're fascist. They say that being Christian is white supremacist. And they do it over and over and over again. And for years, conservatives were censored on social media for fighting back. And you'd have people, you'd have all of these mainstream media outlets and you'd hear their pundits say, go make your own social media network, go make your own news outlet, go ahead, do that yourself. And as soon as we do that, here we are, the Post Millennial, Human Events, other outlets, right? Turning Point USA, they have Frontlines out there. TPUSA does all of the college events. Trump launched his own social media platform. Rumble is a conservative competitor to YouTube. And even that, they still cannot stand that we have any sort of voice in the marketplace at all. And so they go even harder with this stuff. Mm-hmm. They say that words are violence, and then they fight those words with actual violence. And Savannah is exactly right. This has got to stop. The real thing, though, is that it's not stopping. It's just getting worse. And we saw it get worse after this roundtable, even though I believe it was Nick Shirley and Savannah Hernandez both called out media who was in the room directly, the White House press pool, and said, you guys have been doing this to us. You have no respect for our work. You say Antifa's fake. You make fun of us, and you claim that we're fascist authoritarian Nazis, and you're liars. And even after that, media came out, mainstream media, and did the exact same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe J.B. Pritzker had the gall to come out a few days ago because somebody was calling some of the Democrats fascist and say that, this was dangerous, was going to lead to violence. Like, they all know exactly what they're doing. They are trying to spin up their wackos. They're the blue-haired moonbats, as I like to call them, because they know these people are mentally unstable. One of the things that I guess I shouldn't have been, but I was a little shocked to see after Charlie Kirk's assassination was this immediately escalate, where we had numerous
Yes.
other terrorist attacks afterward. I thought there would at least be a lull and some sort of internal reflection, like, hey, maybe we should stop dehumanizing these people, comparing them to Nazis and Hitler. Maybe we should get back to reality. But I just don't think they're capable of it at this point. I think they're so invested in this idea that they can't get away from it. And I don't know what we do to fix that. They can't argue on the merit of their ideas or they lose. So the only thing they have left is to demonize us, so people will not listen to us. They'll think, oh, I shouldn't even pay attention to what Michael Lauber or Libby Emmons or whoever else says. They're Nazis, so I'm just going to ignore what they say and I'm just going to attack them. That this is their most effective tactic, and I don't know how we break them of it to end this.
Yeah, and they were celebrating Charlie's murder. They were
Yeah.
actually out there celebrating that a young man, a father, a husband, the leader of an organization that employs hundreds and hundreds of people, they were celebrating his murder and calling for more.
Yeah.
School teachers, professors, people who are out there in your community, doctors, nurses, they were out there saying this stuff. And we're supposed to trust the infrastructure that puts these people in a position to take care of us in some cases, to teach our children. It's absolutely insane. It's totally bonkers. And I wonder, how do we stop this stuff? Maybe you have leftists in your family. There's leftists in my family. I try and talk to them, and they are just so blind to it. I mean,
Yeah.
after Charlie was murdered, I heard from people in my family about how Jimmy Kimmel was the real victim here. And I was like, you guys
Yeah.
are insane. You're totally out of your minds. No, that's just not true. It's not true. And he's got his show back, but Charlie doesn't have his life back.
Well, exactly. Yeah, and like there should be a normal, sane person. There is no comparison to somebody losing their show because of something horrible they said. The consequences for their actions, and again, only temporary. All they wanted him to do was make an apology, make things right, and then Nexstar and Sinclair did want him to make a donation to Charlie Kirk's memorial and to his family. But those to me seem like a small ask, especially when Charlie Kirk lost his life for free speech. And he was out there doing what he did, trying to have a conversation with people who he disagrees with politically in a very polite fashion. But instead, he's killed for it. They mischaracterize things he says. They develop more of these kill lists. They continue to encourage it. And because they're clever in how they do these things, a lot of times it's in ways where they can't be charged. They're extremely upset about websites like who killed Charlie Kirk that's pointing out this stuff, then contacting their employers and saying, hey, do you really want to have this madman there working for you, teaching at your school, that's saying these kind of hateful things online or calling for more death? They act like that's an attack on their free speech. We spent years of cancel culture. If you called out or even questioned anything with the LGBTQ MS-13 movement, they'd go after you. They'd go after your employer. You couldn't say anything about illegal immigration without fear of losing your job or consequences. Twitter, prior to Elon Musk taking over, it was basically a one-sided conversation. If you said anything against them, you could get tossed. I mean, I lost my original account on there. Numerous others did too. It's been so one-sided. They've been in such a position of privilege for so long that now that they're starting to have actual equality and fair treatment on these online platforms, they just can't take it. They're apoplectic.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they run over to Blue Sky so that they can scream some more about how we're all Hitler and they should come out and kill us. And then that's what they try and do over and over again. I don't know how you get past it, right? I mean, this is a real problem. So I know for sure there's a lot of conservatives who read and follow the mainstream news. I check out the Washington Post, I check out the New York Times, I check out CNN and MSNBC. I want to know what they're saying. I want to know what they think is happening, right? And then of
Yeah.
course I read all of the stuff on the right as well. I read Breitbart and I read our competitors over at Daily Wire and Daily Caller and Daily Signal and all of the rest. I check out what everybody's saying. The New York Post is one of my favorites. You have to know what everybody is saying. But there's no way, and I don't know how to fix this. There's no way for stories from, the right side of things to break through that blue wall and get read by the left They don't look at it. They say to themselves, that's far right, it's Nazis, we're not going to read it. And so they're still confused as to why Trump won in 2016. They still don't understand that. They don't realize that there's a crisis in this country where a lot of people are done being lied to and are never going to stand here and say anymore that, fantasy is reality. We're just not going to do it. And so they're confused, they're perplexed, they get angry like a dementia patient, just
Yeah.
lashing out of nowhere. You have no idea what's going on or why they're even doing this. What do they think is happening? They've convinced themselves of so many lies. They're not interested in hearing the other side. In fact, there's all of these things where it's like, if you're friends with leftists, you kind of just agree not to talk politics. They
Yeah.
can't help themselves. They can't help themselves. They spew it all the time. But you're just supposed to sit there and take it. And there's this notion that the left has had this moral authority in the United States, and they've had it for a long time, right? Going back to
Yeah.
like the 60s and the civil rights movement. You could say that that's really where they picked it up once they ditched their KKK robes and picked up the civil
Yeah.
rights uniform. They've been claiming that they're morally correct, feminism, all of the rest of it. And it turns out that they are not entitled to this moral authority anymore. They haven't been in a long time. There's nothing moral about abortion. There's nothing moral about transing your kids or euthanasia or fighting with law enforcement or wandering around saying the borders should be open or backing literal actual terrorists. There's no
Yeah.
morality there. And the right needs to stop just sort of ceding that moral authority. There's absolutely no circumstance in which you should say, oh, the left has, this morally correct perspective, so we have to be nice about what they're saying and not totally call them out for being liars and fabricators. No, that's done now. That's they killed Charlie for doing all of the right things.
Yes.
And the time for negotiation and nuance with their views is over.
You're exactly right. I mean, the house of lies they live in has been torn down brick by brick over the last 10 years. And I think they just can't deal with that reality. But you're right. I think part of the problem was a lot of us on the right were too nice about things till recently. And then this was kind of the tipping point that was just too much for a lot of people. I think some of us have been out there kind of try to call this for a while, but now it's a unified movement on the right. We, as you said, we are not going to take this anymore. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to live in the delusions. We're not going to pretend someone is a man that is actually a woman and vice versa. We're just tired of this stuff. I think that's, like you said, I don't think they understand it yet. They don't know what happened, that there was this giant shift, and that's part of what upsets them. We do need to take a quick break here from our sponsors, and then we're going to be right back with even more.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
Life can be pretty unpredictable, filled with good days and not so good days. And sometimes, the only difference between the two is your level of preparedness. The Jace case lets you be better prepared for whatever comes your way. It contains antibiotics and other prescription medications so that you aren't caught unprepared. With a Jace case, you are able to get your prescription medication before the unpredictable happens, allowing you to turn those not so good days into great ones. Go to jace.com now and get your own Jace case.
Thank you for staying with us. And again, the best way to support our program and all the great programs here on X America News is by supporting our sponsors. You can do that by going to jace.com or jacemedical.com. Use code INSURRECTION for an additional discount and pick up a Jace case for yourself and your family. This isn't a Band-Aid kit or a boo-boo box. This contains antibiotics, non-narcotic pain relievers, steroids, and other prescription medication that could be necessary or even life-saving if you're in a situation where help is not on the way. So whether you're concerned about I don't know, maybe Antifa riots getting out of control in your city and everything getting shut down until the National Guard can get things under control. Or maybe it's China cutting off our drug supply. We still don't have facilities here all the way spun up to produce a lot of the drugs that we need here at home. Or any number of other concerns. A lot of people are keeping their eyes on 3i Atlas right now, thinking there's about to be an alien invasion. But, this is one of those items that it's better to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. They can customize what's in the kit. If you or a family member is allergic to something that's in there normally, you can also expand what's in there. If you have a relative or yourself, do you have allergies, you can have an EpiPen or other items thrown in. They also have other kits available for specific injuries or illnesses, blowout kits. They have kits for parasite cleanses. So again, go to jace.com or jacemedical.com. Use code INSURRECTION. It's a great way to support us so we can keep bringing you the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear, like this next story. So yeah, still staying on our topic. Jack Posobiec sounds the alarms on Antifa and leftist violence during White House briefing with President Trump. I'm going to go ahead and pull the next one too. President Trump discusses failure of Portland's Dem leadership with Andy Ngo in the face of Antifa violence. And again, this is kind of all still the same conversation, but this is I'm actually going to highlight what Andy Ngo has had to say, because we've seen especially in Chicago and in Portland and Eugene, Oregon, that the police department is essentially Antifa adjacent. They refuse to enforce the law, protect journalists, or even protect their own citizens, and instead they're shielding Antifa. A lot of us get frustrated when we see, okay, well, they finally arrested some people, and then they're charged with something akin to littering rather than firebombing a building or whatever else they've perpetrated. They end up with a slap on the wrist. They might do 30 days in jail and some community service. Maybe they'll have to report in for a little while, but if it's somebody on the right, they throw the book at them, they lock them up. I mean, something we brought up yesterday is at this point in Biden's administration, there were 700 J6 defendants already locked up. And right now, yes, we got a few arrests here and there with this violence, but not to the level that we've seen. I think that's part of why we keep seeing it. I hope we see the DOJ step things up and start arresting these people when they want to play human traffic cone and block ICE from getting in and out of their facility, or slashing the vehicle's tires, or outright assaulting them. Because at some point there have to be consequences, or this isn't going to change. And Andy Ngo pointed out, this has been an ongoing battle, that these people are violent militants. These are not protesters, and we have to start treating them as such.
Yeah, and Andy's right about that. And he has a lot of experience in exactly what goes on with the Portland police and the police in Oregon and Washington. In fact, it was Andy's reporting, always revealing the mugshots of Antifa members who were arrested, that led to Oregon refusing to publicly release mugshots. Why? Why did they go along with that ask from Antifa that they not release these mugshots? Antifa's coming out. Andy's harassing us. We got arrested and he's showing people. Dude, you got arrested. Now you get consequences. A lot of these people end up just being released or getting a slap on the wrist, or maybe a couple of days or time served or something like that. And they don't actually end up facing the consequences for their actions. And we saw very clearly, this is something Nick Sorter, who was in the room yesterday, also was talking about when he got arrested, was it like a week or something ago, he got arrested in Portland for covering all of this stuff because journalists flocked to the area when it turned out that Trump was going to send in the National Guard and start actually cracking down. And so Sorter was out there. He got into an altercation with Antifa, who basically attacked him. He got arrested. They dropped it, but they basically dropped it because the federal government was beginning an investigation, and that was like a little too hot for them. They didn't want to have to deal with that. I think Nick is suing anyway, as well he should, because that's crazy. But he's not the only one who goes out there, gets attacked by Antifa, and he's the one that gets arrested. Andy Ngo experienced violence at the hands of Antifa many times when he was just out there covering the stuff, and he started covering it in college because it was interesting. Without any political agenda. His his political views were shaped in part because of his coverage, and certainly wasn't the other way around. And I was very pleased to see the president take such a deep and compelled interest in what was going on in these cities. President Biden said that Antifa was just an idea. Well, an idea doesn't have a safe house, an idea
No.
doesn't have ends with the police department where they get let go. An idea doesn't get a government to stop releasing mugshots because it looks bad for their organization. And Jack was there too. He was really great talking about the international impact of Antifa, which is something that his book goes back into, like over 100 years of this, back to the Weimar Republic in Germany. And he urged the president to designate the international Antifa as international terrorist organization. And the president said that he was going to do that. So we're looking forward to that coming out of the White House as well.
Yeah, and just to really underscore that point, we covered a story a few days ago about in Hungary, this Antifa member that was part of this hammer mob that attacked a bunch of people in Hungary prior to, it wasn't their last election. I want to say it was the one before that. Sorry, guys, I can't quite remember. But the EU is now protecting her. Yeah. The event happened a while back, but now the EU is protecting her from further prosecution after they convicted somebody else in this little hammer mob that was also in Antifa. And honestly, that person got a relatively light sentence in my opinion, considering they're smacking people in the face, caused numerous injuries, numerous hospitalizations, and the guy ended up with, I think it was like 18 or 16 months in jail, which seems a little on the low side to me when you're attacking actual peaceful protesters with hammers and bats and trying to put them in the hospital. But yeah, this is an international organization, and a lot of their leadership here in the U.S., like the two founders of Rose City Antifa, they just fled to Sweden, I believe. This other Antifa professor, I'm blanking on his name, over at Rutgers. I don't know if he's fled the country yet, but he's planning on it.
I think it was Mark
there
Gray.
you go.
And yeah,
Yes.
he took off, I think, for Spain. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we know they're organized. This whole idea that they're just a figment of our imaginations. I mean, the assaults are real. The attacks are real. They carry the flags. I'd like to see them start wrapping these people up when they do arrest them, because now that they are a domestic terrorist organization, it'll be even better when they are an international terrorist organization. But even having the memorabilia or the regalia on it, the logos, the flags, anything like that, that is grounds for an arrest. And then people that are providing material support, same thing. So we've got to step it up. But yeah, they both stood their ground, and this is what we need real action on this. I know the media is going to, again, you had a story too, we'll get to in a second, where CNN is once in denial about this, but something has to be done, or this is never going to change, and they will only get more violent with time.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And also, the thugs that are out there in Europe attacking people with hammers, bats, machetes, all of the rest of it. This is a form of terrorism, and
Yeah.
that the EU is not protecting people from this form of terrorism is crazy. And Europe, of course, has its own additional problems of Islamic terror being imported through their open borders system, where they just let in anybody, regardless of how many rapes they've committed or how many schoolgirls they threatened to and trap in their basements or whatever else was going on in the UK, which is just absolutely mind-bogglingly insane. But a lot of this comes down to this errant concept that it is compassionate what these leaders are doing. It is compassionate to let in all of these migrants. It is compassionate to open the borders and all of this other stuff. And it's just not true. Where these leaders need to be compassionate, they need to be compassionate to the people that voted for them, to the
Yeah.
people whose countries they are meant to steward into the next election cycle and into the next generation. I want to see more compassion for Americans than for the people of the world, frankly. And that's something I think that everyone needs to keep speaking up about, because if we don't vouchsafe our country, we are going to lose that country. And there's not going to be any compassion from the invading terrorists for Americans and Europeans.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And make no mistake, what we see happening in Europe, they want to see here, that should be our warning sign. And when you see, governments in the UK, they have more concern about a literal terrorist whose first name happened to be Jihad, which I kind of feel like is a warning sign that you probably shouldn't let.
His literal
Yeah.
his parents named him Jihad. What was their expectation for their son? Were they
Exactly.
thinking like, oh, he's going to grow up to be a pediatric neurosurgeon?
Yeah. I'm sure that's what they'd tell you. But yeah, when your name's Jihad al-Shami, Jihad of Syria, that should be a warning sign that this is somebody that, at the very least deserves some extra scrutiny. But that's not going to happen. That would be a racist of us and Islamophobic. Watch journalist Julio Rosas at White House meeting explaining how Democrats and the media provide cover for Antifa. So I'm going to play this clip here real quick, and then we've got another one's even more mind-boggling.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, for having us here. And not to sound like a broken record, but it needs to be said that Antifa is real. Yeah. It's real. It's a threat. I just saw them last weekend over in Portland while they're causing mayhem over there. And the reason why they're such a big problem is because we have Democrats and a lot of people in the mainstream media refusing to acknowledge that they even exist, right? So how can we as a country begin to address it when you have large swaths of these people who are supposedly decision makers and people who are supposed to inform, they don't want to say that it exists. Because the common argument is like, well, they're not a real organization because there's no national leadership, they don't have a national headquarters, so how can law enforcement go after a group that doesn't exist like that? Well, law enforcement goes after criminal groups that organize to rob banks or do smash and grabs. They don't have a registered LLC, they don't have official membership cards, they don't have a business address, but law enforcement still goes after them because they're working as a group. These people don't just show up, randomly at the same time to do the same thing, dressed in a very similar fashion, espousing.
And he's exactly right. They may not have a registered LLC, as he said, but this is clearly organized. I know they've tried to purport this myth for a while that they're individual cells, kind of like Al-Qaeda, strewn throughout the country. But there is a leadership structure. There is a funding structure. And I think, we've had Ryan Morrow on a bunch of times, he's a friend of a program. And recently he released this report, which, believe it or not, he gathered all the information off Soros's websites to put together this report on $80 million. And that's just the tip of the iceberg that they have sent to literal terrorist organizations by funneling it through various NGOs, through other entities that are on the ground, 501c3s, organizations like the Umbrella or Arabella Consulting, the same entity that Bill Gates and Reid Hoffman, Neville Singham, others funnel the money through that ends up on the ground supporting these entities, from the Queer Gun Club of Salt Lake City that Charlie Kirk's assassin's furry boyfriend was involved with, to literal Antifa cells throughout the country. This has to be a bottom-up and top-down approach. We have to eliminate the membership on the ground, get these Looney Tunes off the streets. But the bigger picture is destroying their funding, and I really hope we start seeing some action on that soon.
Yeah, I think that it is a high time to to look into the IRS and see exactly what every single tax-deductible, charitably designated organization is actually doing. There's a lot of rules about charitable organizations. You're not allowed to, if you're a 501c3, you're not allowed to say partisan political things. And that is broken by literally every not-for-profit theater company in the entire Northeast, because that's really all they do. But the other thing is that you mentioned leadership, and there's this idea that because you don't see their leader out there saying like, hey, I'm the leader, let's go on a march, that in some way they don't have leadership. Well, in fact, in 2020, in the summer there, when we had all of the BLM Antifa stuff going on, Patrisse Cullors, who was the head of BLM at the time, she spoke to this idea that there's no leadership. And she said, that's by design. We don't have a leader because anyone can be a de facto leader of any part of this segment at any time. Of course, she bought a bunch of houses in California with the not-for-profit charitable donation money that she got. But this is the idea, too, with Antifa and BLM and these other leftist organizations. The leadership is like a hydra. You can cut off one head and another head emerges. So when you have media pundits saying that it has no leadership, they're looking at an arcane concept of what leadership looks like. And so they really need to correct themselves on that.
Yeah, and it's very clear they do have a leadership and a leadership structure. In Chicago recently, they arrested the Hammond brothers, two twins that had basically been the leadership for the local Antifa cells, but immediately somebody else stepped up to take the reins. There was another person, his name is Jeff Tischler, that they're also looking at. That's, again, a prominent member there. And he's also a journalist for the SPLC, writes up all these articles about how hateful and evil the right is, while at the same time helping the brigade and storm buildings throughout Chicago and assault ICE officers and journalists. But it's deeper than that. It's the media running cover for them. And then I want to bring this up here real quick, because this is was breaking this morning, but this from Elon Musk. It says far more than 100 million U.S. taxpayer funds funneled into NGOs fueling chaos. Trump briefed on dark money networks. So this is, I cut this out from the article, but this just shows this is just U.S. tax dollars. So this is not even all the private money that's funneled into it, but this is who it went to and then how it was funneled to various organizations, whether they were domestic extremists or civil unrest advocates. Umbrella seems to be Arabella, I cannot pronounce that to save my life. Arabella seems to kind of be the linchpin where a lot of not just Soros, but others launder money through there, and then it gets out for distribution. But it's also the money going to these, Islamist organizations here and abroad through these same entities. So they get federal funds, through USAID or through the State Department or other places. Then a large chunk of that goes to line their pockets and the people that work at these charities, but the rest gets distributed to essentially literal terrorists on the street. And that's not even to bring up some of the other entities like there was the entity that was handing out the bionic face shields and riot shields in California. This was an NGO that was supposed to be providing medical care for the homeless in the LA area. I don't think all of their, I'm sure a lot of their donors have a case for fraud, because I'm sure a lot of them thought that they were donating money to help the homeless, not fund riots and fund violence. But this whole network needs to be brought down. I think we start by removing their tax exempt status, and then we look at other potential legal repercussions or ways to pull back this funding and bankrupt them so it can't continue. Because we got to start fighting fire with fire.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Ford Foundation also, the Ford Foundation going back into the 50s has been funding leftist and liberal projects on purpose. The reason that there was a regional theater movement in the United States was essentially because of the Ford Foundation in the 50s putting together the money for all of this stuff. And the heads of these granting organizations, right? You get in someone who studied not-for-profit management at a leftist Ivy League university, comes in and runs these foundations, and the next thing you know, they're just handing out money to all of these extremely far left organizations and groups and just putting it under the radar. They're like, oh, go ahead, this is for you. But the IRS has been absolutely clueless in handing out tax deductible, tax designations under 501c3, and that needs to be looked at. We need Congress to take a much closer look. Some staffer should get in there and get a list of all of the organizations, what they're called, what their mission is, and where their money goes, and then really take a look and start pulling some of these tax deductible statuses, because there's absolutely no reason that taxpayers should be funding these kinds of efforts that are directly working to undermine America itself.
Agreed. I kind of feel like the IRS is complicit in this because, right now we're in the process of creating a 501c3 for our media organization here and some of the charitable work that we've done in the past and educational items. And, we're getting a full-on proctology exam. They want to, see everything, every document. They know exactly what we're doing. And I have to think it's got to be the same for these type of entities, but there's just no pushback. That they know what they're doing and they allow it. Kind of like the IRS targeting scandal under Lois Lerner. They knew exactly what was going on, but they have deniability. And that's why it's so hard to bring them up on charges. That, again, this is intentional. But, the money is a big problem, but you also have this where, and maybe there are some links to cash here, but you also have all these individual wackos that are participating in this. Because from what I understand, a lot of this was individuals. Anarchist website targets ICE agents, posts blueprints of Chicago facilities, federal bulletin. So a lot of this came from individuals doing research, posting it. Now, that isn't to say, though, that the website might not be paid for by funds from one of these NGOs, or maybe some of the people on the ground are receiving money in one way or another. But this is the other dangerous side of this, is the individuals that are assisting in this, pulling up blueprints from the buildings they're in and buildings in the surrounding area, and essentially advising them on how to be more dangerous as they attack feds.
Yeah, and we saw in Chicago recently that federal officers were attacked. They were rammed into, and the people who rammed into them were released already, you know? So what the hell? What's going on there? And this idea too, yeah, I mean, this was a federal bulletin that went out. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem was talking about this, that there was a group, there were people that put blueprints of federal ICE facilities online on anarchist websites so that they could be further attacked. Because while the funding is a huge component of it, what happens is that funding facilitates people doing this kind of thing on their own and thinking that this is the right and acceptable thing to do. It is not. And also, the under the Biden administration, we heard repeatedly Joe Biden say that he needed Congress to act to create some new laws for border security and everything else. Trump came in, simply enacted the laws that Congress had already passed. And now you have people just saying, you know, we don't want those laws to be enforced. You have people in Congress saying, we don't want the laws that we passed to be enforced, but they can't actually overturn them because no one really wants that either. So
Yep.
this is a situation where the funding and the atmosphere create the conditions for further violence.
Exactly. Yeah. We didn't need new laws. We just needed a new president. But yeah, to your point, this funding allows them to amplify the voice of an individual psychopath that goes out and gathers this information with the intent to do harm. But they have a network already. They can then push that information out on. And then when Kristi Noem or somebody else does say or do something about it, it's already too late. I mean, the internet's forever. Once this information's been gathered, it can be emailed if they can't put it up on a website. So it's already out there to do harm. Well, again, we have more insane accusations from the left. Democrat Senator Merkley accuses Trump administration of faking anti-ICE riots. I don't even know what to say about this. Like, how detached from reality do you have to be to believe this? Or is it the more likely item? It's to give cover so we can have a mainstream media then write up articles on this and pretend this viewpoint is somehow valid, that this is reality. Because I don't see them pushing back against this.
Yeah, this is crazy, right? And the mainstream media is certainly not going to push back against this because they like all the craziness, they like all of the lies, and they revel in them. We saw that at CNN, right? I mean, Erin Burchett came out and was saying, Burnett, rather, sorry. Yeah, she was coming out and saying, Antifa doesn't have any leaders. They're not even a real organization. The real problem is right wing extremism. And so I took a look actually at the study that she was citing. And the study that she was citing was about the rise of left wing violence. And it said, hey, there's this giant rise in left wing violence. That's not to say that right wing extremism isn't a problem, you guys. But when you start to look at what they're referring to as right wing extremism, because I was like, what are they even talking about? So I took a look at a PBS article also from September about right wing extremism. Now they're legit going back to 1999. They're citing country music hate songs. This is what they're doing. This is
Oh,
their
yeah.
right wing extremism. They're just lying. They're making stuff up.
Well, yeah, it's completely devoid from reality, especially when, they count fights in prisons as right-wing violence, Islamic terrorism as right-wing violence. But we can't look at the Summer of Love riots. That was just the political climate. That was social change. That had nothing to do with the Democrats. Same with most of these. I love watching them excuse every leftist violent shooter or just try to find the imaginary loophole they can to not have to face any responsibility for it. And granted, some of these people I do think are just outright wackos, like this recent shooter, and North or South Carolina, the guy that was the military vet that had a traumatic brain injury. So sometimes it is just a crazy person. But the whole thing started with Jimmy Kimmel. It's just this denial of reality that that Charlie Kirk's murderer was not a devout leftist, instead pretending he was a Trump supporter. And I know he used clever word games so they can say, well, actually, that's not what he said. But everybody knows what he was inferring and why he did it. It's to put a thumb in the eye and to shirk any responsibility the left has for their own violence. As you stated earlier, our words are violence, but their violence is only words.
Right. Yeah, that's what they tell us, right? I mean, this goes back to we've seen it for years and we've been calling it out for years and we've been ignored 4 years, which is why it was really so heartening to see the president literally holding a roundtable on all this stuff in the White House yesterday. It was so important. But yeah, this has all just been coming at us for this whole time, where they just make up lies and say that this is what's, that like right wing extremism is the real problem. You had President Biden over the previous 4 years during his term saying that right wing extremism and domestic terrorism were the real threats against the country, and he didn't mention leftism at all. The ADL had their hate watch, the SPLC and their hate watch thing, right? They all have these things. And who do they put on it? They put Turning Point USA on a hate map. That doesn't make any sense. Anyone who's been to a Turning Point USA event knows that it is welcoming. It is steeped in traditional values, biblical values, and that these are good things. What Charlie Kirk was doing was seeking to elevate American youth and give them responsibility for their own lives, and say to them, what you build, you can achieve. Go for it. Go forth. Do things. Don't be feeling like you're a victim and you're oppressed all the time. It's just not real. And
Yeah.
what the left wants is they want you to feel bad about yourself and your country and your capability. They want you to constantly be blaming somebody. And then they want you to partner up with the government to be, your life partner. They don't want you to get married and have a bunch of kids. They want you to kill your babies and trans your kids. It's so weird. Why
Yeah.
is this what they want from us? Why?
Yeah. And I don't understand how they can find so many people that support these insane views. I know you got to go. We're almost out of time here. But since you brought up these hate groups and where they how they pretend that that's what we are. If you guys are stayed tuned here on X America News, up next is our next our next host here was written up as a black white supremacist, Will Johnson. Now they did eventually remove that from him, but this is he was a former journalist over there with Alex Jones at InfoWars for a long time, and somehow Will became a black white supremacist. We also have someone that Annie Cyrus, shout out to her. They wrote her up as an Islamophobe. She's from Iran, but apparently she is also a dirty racist. But any words of wisdom you'd like to leave our audience with here before we go?
Just go out there and speak the truth, and don't let the liars win. Don't just bend under those lies. Just speak the truth and be calm about it and happy.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, we've got to be the happy warriors. We can't be discouraged, even when we see these lies perpetrated by the mainstream media. They're losing more and more power and validity all the time as their lies are exposed. The country is trending in the right direction right now, but that isn't to say that we are out of the danger zone yet. The left is really, I think, pushing for a civil war because that's all they've got. But again, Libby, I want to thank you for joining me here today. You're welcome back anytime. To our audience, please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people the news, the mainstream media.